there's a huge undertaking for whoever takes it over next. Anyone who's been around pipeline right now understand that. Anyone who understands the expectation head boys basketball coach knows that it's a tall order for the involvement we ask of them. So that's second sixth grade travel teams. That's local YMCA, that's middle school stuff. So he was always at those things. He's always poured himself into that. I thank him for that. He tried to do with the Newcastle community as a coach. So that's all I have on that. We also have an introductory staff member. I'd like to recognize our new staff member.
Yeah, we're very excited. She just hired tonight. He's 1985 grad. So he's a long career in administration, coaching, theater. He's a very diverse background. Can do a lot of things. So, but we're very excited. He's been in administration in Illinois, back home now in Newcastle, and we're very excited about that. And we replace Doggett, which is a big task to fill, but he can do it, and we're just really excited to have him.
I'm excited to be back on. I think tonight I'll celebrate the community. 85.
Okay.
You were more than my son.
Yes. I just qualified.
Do we have anything else on that? All right. Next we'll move to submission of monthly corporation receipts, disbursements, as well as refund reports. This is they don't need approval. It's just an question about that's information received in our monthly board packets. Anybody have any questions or anything about that? All right, great. We'll move to item 3, which is new business, and item A is retiree edition. Turn it over to Dr. Schumann.
So this is always bittersweet. This time of year, we get a lot more retirements. We try to recognize retirees as through throughout the year. So we have retirees. We got Mary Jane Dodge. She'll be with us tonight. 30 years. 39 years in Newcastle School. Great teacher, phenomenal friends. So we wish her the best in retirement. And next we have Robin Miller. 38 years, Riley Elementary. Were they all in at Riley?
No, I did parking, and I taught there 4 years, and then Eastwood for 7, and then Riley. I loved every school. I loved every grade I taught. And it was an honor.
Your positivity and love of the kids, they know it, feel it, and we appreciate it. One thing, come on up here, and get a picture. I like that. And I want to thank the family of Robin as well, because it's not teacher goes to the teacher, not just it's the whole family that comes with it. And so grading papers and all of the events and things, it's a lot. So I want to thank the family as well.
They helped me with my room. They helped me.
See, that's what I'm saying.
You're saying that?
All right.
And one more. Thank you. Thank you.
And we have our Eastwood Food Service Manager. It takes a whole village. We got bus drivers. We've got custodians. It takes everybody to serve our kids. Sandra Wright served 22 years, Eastwood Food Service Manager. And so let's give her a round of applause. She couldn't be here as well. So, but we thank everybody for everything they did. That's it.
Can I tell a little story?
Yeah.
Mary Jane's not here, but I'm going to tell a little story, and please tell her that I told this.
It might be in the paper.
We've been on that. She has had, it's not focus, it's a high ability. And, she had a student that just wasn't really engaged, and she tried to reach them, and little fella just had a lot of potential that just wouldn't engage. And I think she visited a church by chance one time, and he was doing a little performance, and he just lit up when he was out there singing and dancing for people and putting on a show. And she said, okay. So with that in mind, she started a 5th and 6th grade choir at Will Arise. And they then were looking for performances. I knew that because she said, well, do you have any place I can go perform? I want to take these kids out, and they love it, and they eat it up, and it's, So she took them on the road. So she started a choir, practiced with them, took them on the road. And that's not an exception. I think we could tell stories like that about any of our teachers, but that's the level of dedication. And you know what? That kid became engaged, and his attitude about school changed. And it's just exemplary, and it's caring, and it's loving the kids. And I know all the people do that, but I knew that story about Mary Jane. Just wanted to share it.
I will say, if you want to leave Ralph and family, you can stay as long as you would like. The meeting agenda is riveting. I think you'd love it. But if you don't, we're going to talk about school finance and a lot of other things. If you don't, then now would be a good exit time. You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm not pushing you out. You don't have to leave. Okay.
There you go.
All right, so at this time, we'll move on to item B, and that's the building corporation lease financing option and reimbursement resolution. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Shoemaker to kind of talk about that before.
Yep. So, as you know, we've had a 2022 GEO bond, a 2024 GEO bond, and a 2025 GEO bond plan. And a lot of these, this is the way that we get our roofing projects done. And just for, I'm going to reiterate this. I've said it several times, but I think this puts us, this new roofing project that we've got planned for the 2025 GEO bond puts us in the a little over between $9 and $10 million of roofs since I've been here. So we have a lot of roofs, we get a lot of square footage, and we got to maintain all of this. So we're in really good shape in terms of our facilities in that way. But one of the things that with new legislation coming in that session, the legislative session won't be done until the end of April. In conversations with Ice Miller, the decision was made, and it was a good recommendation. If new legislation would impact the ability to get one of the 2025 GEO bond like we had planned, and just for your reference, there's a $1.5 million roof in that, and that's the Career Center. That's what we estimate. We don't have a hard price on it yet, but the decision I made the decision to talk to the board about a lease finance option, because that would be independent of what the legislation would impact. So I'm hopeful that we can still do a 2025 GEO bond, which is what we have planned. But if not, then we would have the lease financing option, because it is not a good option. And this is no joke. And Mackenzie's here. I think 6 buckets she had in her office, I would imagine, this spring. When I visited one time, there was probably 6 buckets. One of them was a big trash can. So we do have leaks there. And that's, one of the things that we need to address. So not doing it for another 3 years is not a good viable option. And we had this planned for 2025. So we need kind of an insurance policy. If we can't get it done through the GEO bond, then we're looking at lease financing. So Lauren from Ice Miller is here, Matt's from Steeple. So I'm not sure which one wants to go first, but we thank you for being here and explaining more about it.
Yeah, since we are speaking specifically about the roofing project, I'll start off going through kind of what the lease financing entails. Sorry, my name is Lauren Seiler. I'm here from Ice Miller. We serve as your school corporation's bond counsel, so assisting with these types of debt financings, the issuance of bonds to help fund these types of capital projects. But we'll start off going through kind of the legal process, why we're here considering the lease financing. And then I'll turn it over to Matt. He'll give a bigger picture of how the certain legislative proposals will impact school financing going forward, or how likely will. And we'll tie into how, as we plan for this 2025 project, how those changes that Matt will emphasize, how we'll have to keep an eye on that as we look to this project and any future financings that we consider as a group. You'll recall from last year and in 2022, the school board passed and issued what are called general obligation bonds. So a little bit more streamlined, directly issued by the school corporation. And Dr. Shoemaker is absolutely right. In an ideal world, pre this General Assembly session, the plan would have been probably to pursue a similar financing structure and use general obligation bonds for this particular roofing project. Unfortunately, what is in current Senate Bill 1, what we expect is likely to pass and be adopted into law, contains a restriction on the issuance of certain general obligation bonds. Essentially, general obligation bonds with that are through a non-controlled process, as this 2025 project would be, and with a short maturity, imposes a cooling off period, after which you would have to wait a year after the maturity of those general obligation bonds before you could issue GO bonds again. So we want to avoid getting into that bucket. But even so, looking back from your 2022 GO bonds, because of the maturity of those bonds and the non-control process we went through, should this legislation pass, the school corporation would be subject to a cooling off period that would be tied to the maturity of those 2022 bonds. Essentially, we wouldn't be able to go through the GO bond issuance process in the timing that you all are hoping to secure these funds and proceed with this roofing project. So we have to look to the alternative. And in that case, in Indiana, the alternative for school corporations is referred to as a lease rental financing. It's something that Newcastle schools lasted back in 2020. So some of you may recall that process, but we wanted to come back and just provide a refresher since it's been a number of years. And even though it's been 5 years since this particular school corporation has gone this route with these bonds, they are commonly issued throughout the state of Indiana. And again, I imagine as these GO bond restrictions come into place, we'll hear it pop up a lot more in communities like this one. So we wanted to make sure we were here to walk through what that looks like for this 2025 project and answer any questions you all have. So please feel free to stop me along the way. I want to first kind of give an overview of what the lease financing structure looks like. And then we've also brought along a timetable that just lays out, particularly for Newcastle schools in this project, what the timing would look like in more firm sense for the school. But please do, if you have any questions as I walk through this, please feel free to interrupt me, ask any questions you all have. So for the lease financing, the key difference that you'll notice from the school corporation's GO bond issuances the past few years is the lease financing is going to involve what's called a building corporation. That entity is actually the one that will be the issuer of the bonds themselves. It's a nonprofit entity, usually 3 to 5 members that are affiliated with the community, but not directly with the school or the board. They don't have any operations or process or use any other funds other than the process of issuing bonds and then managing the expenditure of those bond proceeds. What we also do is we have the building corporation appoint a lessor representative, typically the superintendent or the CFO of the school corporation, who basically serves as the school board's representative to that entity to help manage the funds as they relate to the school board's approved project. The building corporation issues the actual bonds for the project. Those bond proceeds are actually paid directly to the building corporation at a bank account that Ms. Bell and Dr. Shoemaker will help us identify and manage. And those funds held by the building corporation are actually the ones that will be used to pay for the project, the roofing project, and other deferred maintenance that we're looking at in this case. Then there's also a lease agreement and structure that is put in place, and that's essentially how we involve the school corporation and the property tax levy that's used essentially to pay these bonds. There's a lease that would be put in place between the building corporation and the school corporation for the use of a school facility, a school building, that's tied to the project. So we have not gone through that specific process of identifying the building or the transaction of how we would actually set up that particular lease premise. But we, as your bond counsel, in conjunction with your administration, would help identify that building and use that as the property that is being leased pursuant to this transaction. So the building corporation would actually own that building at the closing and the issuance of the bonds, and own the building for the duration while the bonds are outstanding. In order to facilitate that transaction, the building corporation would pay a portion of the bond proceeds to the school corporation as compensation for the purchase of that property. And then the school corporation would lease back that facility from the building corporation for the duration of the bonds. The school corporation would maintain use and occupancy of the facility the entire time. That would go unchanged. But the title and the ownership would obviously be different. There'd also be a mortgage on that particular property as security for the bondholders. But that mortgage would, again, only be there for the duration of the bond's maturity. Once they fully matured, we would release that mortgage and then transfer title back to the school corporation. And the school corporation, in order to make lease rental payments for that facility, would levy property taxes, not dissimilar from how the school corporation would to pay back bondholders when they issue general obligation bonds. But instead of paying the debt, the school corporation property tax levy would be used to make lease rental payments for use of that leased building back to the building corporation. The building corporation in turn uses those lease rental funds to actually pay the principal and interest that's due to bondholders. So Stifel, your underwriter, financial advisor, helps us kind of set what those parameters and terms are. As we go through the process with you, we get into more detail in future months about what those specific numbers look like. But we would help set that structure with their consultation and your board and your administration's property tax strategy to set those particular numbers. Practically, in terms of how the project will run and be financed, it is largely just a few administrative differences for your school business team in terms of how the dollars are expended. So you would levy property taxes quite similar to how you do to pay back general obligation bonds, and you would have those funds available to pay the bond proceeds available to pay for the roofing and deferred maintenance project as you would for a similarly approved project. But there are a few legal approval differences, the different steps the board would be going through to approve this type of structure and approve these types of bonds. So that's what we wanted to get into more specific today, what that would look like and what we'd be coming back to you in subsequent months to ask for. But before I turn to the timetable, I just want to check in any questions generally about the structure of the lease financing.
Seems like an extremely convoluted process. Do other states do this?
They do. It's other states have other sorts of alternative financing mechanisms besides general obligation bonds that we don't typically use for school corporations in Indiana. But when it comes to Indiana school corporations, the two main mechanisms are general obligation bonds issued directly by the school corporation and this lease financing structure.
With the property tax changes, does that change at all our ability? At this point, we always say, oh, we're going to do a bond and it's not going to raise your taxes. But the property tax structure is going to change and that's going to affect what we have.
Yeah, we're going to talk through that. I have some numbers that I'll share with you. I think long story short is we don't really know yet. It's pretty complicated, but I'm going to walk you through some numbers to try to get you up to speed on kind of what's been going on with the legislation that we think is going to pass in the next week or so.
Will you tell us how this one is going to dovetail with the one we already have in place?
Yeah.
For middle school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Warren explained that really well. What I would say about a GO or a lease, practically they're the exact same thing. Mechanically, there's some differences. Legality wise, there's a little bit of differences. The market sees them as the exact same because they're backed by property taxes. So the interest rate, what you pay, is going to be identical on whether you do a GO or lease. So this isn't something that's going to be significantly more expensive. This isn't going to be something that every school corporation in the state hasn't also done. It's more of just being super conservative based on potential legislation to give you guys enough flexibility moving forward. We didn't want to go through the entire process of doing a GO bond, have legislation come in that may prohibit that, or not give you the flexibility to do it when you want to do it. Doing a lease financing, the legislation does not talk about that at all. So you guys will have a lot more flexibility to do what you want and when you want to do it.
Is this process, in terms of, is it any more expensive? Do we end up with any more interest or anything like that?
So in terms of the interest rate, no, you're going to get the exact same interest rate, the exact same credit rating. I know there's some extra meetings on the lease side with the building corporation. There might be a little bit more expense, but when I say a little bit, we're talking about thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands or 20s of thousands or anything like that. But in terms of the interest rate, when we sell your bonds, you'll get the exact same interest rate, whether it's a GO or a lease. Yes.
The additional expense we refer to as the cost of actually issuing the bonds. That's really the delta in terms of the dollar difference between the GO and the lease. But that's simply, again, the additional documentation that's required for the lease structure, a few additional meetings and the involvement of the building corporation. And then pending our discussion with your administration about how we identify the property to be used for the lease premise. In some cases, it requires some title survey work. We're required to do an appraisal of that property. So there are some additional administrative fees associated with this structure. But when it comes to affording you all the flexibility to kind of structure your debt and capital project needs over the next few years, we view it as being more beneficial to pursue this structure so that you all have the opportunities still to borrow to meet your needs.
Building corporation doesn't have like a liability built in with their.
No, the school corporation's existing insurance coverage that they have covers some of the liability that might be associated with the building corporation, and there's also certain legal immunities kind of built into the statute governing those bodies.
Felt assured that you would not put us in a position that.
And we did all this with the middle school.
Yeah.
And it was not very much more expensive.
Right.
So,
We try to preserve cost efficiency. So for example, the real estate work that I mentioned, survey, title, appraisal work, in certain cases, we find properties where we don't need to go through that for a variety of reasons. And so we do take every measure to try to mitigate those costs if and when possible for the structure. But Matt's right, the real reason why we need to talk about the lease financing option today is because of the new legislative restrictions on issuing GO bonds. It unfortunately affects the timing of how quickly we can move forward this project. And if we were to pursue GO bonds for this particular one, it would likely impact.
We need to rest in between times. We get talked. Yes, sorry.
Only other thing I wanted to touch upon from a legislative process, because it does not specifically pertain to the 2025 projects we're going to talk about, but I want to just mention it before Matt gets into more specifics on numbers. The school corporation in 2025, your debt service tax rate is below 40 cents. That's significant because the legal process for any capital project that you're considering to issue bonds to finance, the legal process is driven by two things outside of these restrictions we're talking about, GO bonds. But what the actual process you go through is driven by the total project cost and whether it reaches a certain threshold. And in some cases, it's the applicable debt service tax rate for the school corporation. Right now, those debt service tax rate thresholds, the one that pertains most to the school corporation is 40 cents. So you might recall last year when we went through the process of issuing GO bonds, we went through a controlled project process because at the time the school corporation's debt service tax rate was above 40 cents. For these 2025 bonds, we're looking at going through a non-controlled process, so not needing to go through the same number of meetings and additional kind of waiting periods that we did with those 2024 bonds. because we are below 40 cents as we are approving this particular project. But I wanted to flag that because of the changes that Matt will get into a little bit more detail, one thing that we're going to be looking closely at, especially as we come into the fall, is how your debt service tax rate might be impacted by legislative changes for 2026. If the changes are passed as they're currently written and has the impact that Steeple's projecting, there is a likelihood that the debt service tax rate could, no fault of the board, but it could exceed that 40-cent threshold that is currently in place. And so the legislative changes may also affect process for future bonds. But I wanted to flag that because in this particular 25 project, we're doing it a little bit different than we did in 24. But it may be different again when we talk with you all next year or in subsequent years after that. Again, due to nothing the school corporation is or is not doing, but simply because of how legislation is changing. And that's true for almost every one of our school corporation clients that we speak to. But I just wanted to, as we walk through this timetable, I wanted to flag that it may be different as we approach 2026 in future years. But I did leave for all of you just a copy of the timetable that we've illustrated for these 2025 projects. I just wanted to quickly run through just to give you a sense of kind of how quickly we envision that the board could consider going through these approvals and what we're going to come to for you for request for authorization. Really focusing, you'll see throughout this, there's a number of references to notices that need to be delivered and published. We'll work with Michelle and Dr. Shoemaker to facilitate those pieces of the project as well as the real estate work that I mentioned earlier. But I did want to focus on kind of the school board meetings, hearings, resolutions that will come to you all for your consideration to approve moving forward with the project. So the first we've highlighted for your next board meeting in May. The first action that we would come and ask for you to consider is approving just the start of publishing those legal notices that are required by law to proceed with the financing structure. The first notice that you would be considering is just advertising the first hearing on these projects. That notice would just contain the description of the project that you would all be considering and the date and time and location of the board meeting and the hearing itself. So that would really just be in May, a kickoff to have the board consider whether you're ready to move forward with the legal steps that are required for the financing itself. And the second is a reimbursement resolution that we would present to you all. And essentially, this is something we've done for your previous bond issuance. You might recall it from the 2024 GEO bond process, but it's a federal tax issue that if we adopt a reimbursement resolution, it preserves the school corporation's ability to reimburse itself to the extent that you end up having to pay any expenditures for the project before the bonds are actually issued. So up to 60 days before the date of that reimbursement resolution, any expenses that you might pay out of operations or your rainy day fund before the bonds are actually issued, you could then come back after the bond issuance itself and use some of those bond proceeds to reimburse the expenditures that came out of your rainy day or operations fund for the project. So we view that as something that would be prudent for the board to consider early on in the project, gives your administration the most flexibility to kind of start moving forward with the work. And then the ability to still use the bond proceeds to finance the project. So you still have those dollars down the road available in your operations or your rainy day. So those would be the two items for your May board meeting. And again, we'd be advertising for the first hearing on the project, which in this on the second page of the timetable, we've slated for your June 4th. It would be a hearing for the public to hear about what the project is. We'd be considering a couple of the maximum financial parameters, the maximum borrowing amount, the maximum maturity, maximum interest rate. And so the public would have an opportunity at that meeting to come forward and express any comments or questions that they have to the board and to the administration at that meeting. The board would then consider a couple of the resolutions related to the project. One, again, would be kind of setting those maximum financial parameters. The key there would be those would be informed by the analysis that Steeple does in conjunction with our understanding of the board's and the administration's tax rate management goals and borrowing needs for this particular project. So we'd come back to you in May and June with more specifics on what those numbers would be, but the board would set maximums at that point. You could always, after that point, borrow a lesser amount issue for a shorter term, you just would not be able to exceed the parameters that you'd set at that June meeting without going back through just kind of redoing some of this legal process.
Lauren, if I can say something right here. So if you remember last year when we had the conversations, we did the $4.3 million in bonds last year for the projects. At that time, in consideration of coming back this year and doing an additional $3 million in projects for projects that Dr. Shoemaker had identified. In looking at legislation and talking with Lauren and her team and Dr. Shoemaker and Megan, an idea had come up about potentially approving a higher amount. Lauren mentioned the 40-cent threshold. That's one of the key thresholds. Anticipate the school corporation potentially going above that in the future. With all of the legislative changes, I had mentioned, does the school corporation want to look at potentially authorizing a higher amount now under the current rules? They have made changes over the past several years in legislation. They've always grandfathered projects that have previously been approved. And so while I'm certainly not telling you this is what you should do, the idea would be, do we approve a higher amount, say $6 million to take care of this project? And then whenever the next project will come up, say it's in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whenever the board decides, that would give you the authorization to do this project and then hopefully another project. Without having to worry about potential future legislation. Could potential future legislation come back and say we're not grandfathering? It's certainly possible. We haven't seen that in the past. And so in talking about those maximum financial parameters, when we set those, wanted to have the conversation tonight, put it in front of the board so you guys all could talk about it, make a decision. Doesn't have to be tonight. But would you want to consider approving a higher amount so that you could take care of this project and then hopefully the next project and not have to worry about any potential changes to that future legislation? So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there since we were talking about maximum, something for you as a group to talk about. Does it make sense to do it now? We don't know what things are going to look like in the future. Maybe you're not harmed in any way and you can improve it in the future. I think this way we just give you a little bit more flexibility. Maybe rest assured that you don't have to worry about the next one. So I did want to throw that out there since we were talking about the maximums.
So if we did allocate more money right now through this process, then we wouldn't have to go through this process again either. Even if the legislation didn't change.
Assuming it fit within the parameters that we set here in a couple of months. Yeah. So say, for instance, we pick $6 million and you do $3 million this year. If in 3 or 4 years you decide you actually want to do 5 million or 7 million, some number above your authorization, then you would need to come back and get another authorization for that higher amount. But as we sit here today and what we know today, if it fits within the parameters of that $3 million or whatever number you guys decide, I don't want to put the number in your mind, then yeah, you would have already completed all of the steps and therefore wouldn't need to come back through those steps again.
Not really savvy with this. How would that affect the 40 cent that we were talking about?
So it would be if you went above 40 cents in the future, you would be subject to a different authorization process. But if you got that done now, then even with this legislation that I'm going to talk about, if it forces your rate to go above 40 cents and puts you in a different legal authorization process, you already have the authorization for the next process. And so you wouldn't have to do a future one under different parameters.
So for this 2025 process, we're going through, again, for a non-controlled project. So it's one lesser hearing. It's basically what we went through for last year for the 2024 bonds, where we had 2 preliminary hearings, a 30-day period for taxpayers and voters to petition the project. That does not apply to this 2025 project because we're going through the non-controlled steps. If we were to come back and need to do a separate round of authorizations, after the school corporation's debt service tax rate was above 40 cents, we'd have to go through the same process we did last year for the 2024 GO bonds. 2 preliminary hearings, resolutions for the board to consider, a 30-day period for taxpayers and voters to have the opportunity to petition in opposition to the project. And then a decision based on how that 30-day period went for the board and administration, whether they wanted to move forward. But anything that you would approve at this, let's just say that's a June board meeting, anything that's approved within those maximum parameters at this June meeting would already be authorized pursuant to this non-controlled project process. So we would not need to come back, again, barring any, again, out of left field legislative changes, we would not need to come back next year to issue the remaining amount of the authorized bonds pursuant to a different process. I do want to just clarify though, if you were to go that route and issue, let's say it's 3 million that you need in 25, but you want to approve 6 now to cover the 3 million you anticipate needing to issue in 2026. The preliminary steps to authorize that full $6 million amount would be done this year. We would not need to come back and redo those. We'll go through a different process because of any tax rate changes, but there would be a couple of steps just more specific to the bond issuance. If we were to issue a second series of bonds, let's say in 2026 or 2027, under this initial authorization. So there would be a few additional legal steps for any second series of bonds. If you were to split it or approve kind of a larger project at the beginning. But the preliminary steps to approve it and set those maximum parameters would be taken care of at this June meeting.
But if we go with a larger amount, that would still fall under all the lease financing. We won't be eligible for GEO bonds until 27.
As it's currently written based on the maturity of the, and I want to offer a caveat just because the language is at best not clear. So under the most conservative of interpretations of how the unclear language is written, the soonest that we could issue short-term, non-controlled GEO bonds would be January of 2027. And then you also, if you were to go that route, depending on how those were structured in the process we went through, those GEO bonds might kickstart another kind of GEO cooling off period is how legislators are referring to it. We'd certainly have a discussion with you all about what your options were at the time if and when you did need to issue additional bonds, what your options would be, but those would be some of the considerations we'd anticipate if that were what we were talking about next year.
They've made all of this completely far too complicated and complex. I mean, Lauren and I have spent all day on the phone talking with different people. What we're mentioning tonight is simply playing a little bit of defense against what might come in the future. I'm certainly not telling you this is something that you should do. Simply want to throw it out there as a consideration. Do you want to just take care of all of it now so you don't have to worry about it in the future? If the answer is no, does it materially change your plans in the future? Probably not, but it's just one less thing you have to worry about if you decide to go with that route. But again, completely up to the board.
Just for planning purposes, or just to go back a step, we were planning on $3 million for the 2025 GEO bond, and then we had another one in 2028 was about equivalent. So, that would be, those two GEO bonds would be about $6 million, which is kind of what we're talking about along the lines of here if we go for the maximum. So as we were talking, that may actually take care of the 2028 GEO bond as well.
And Matt will get
the projects within it.
Matt will get into specifics, but based on how they're phasing in changes to how assessed valuations will be calculated and how that affects school financing. 2020 may sound like it's a far way off, but we anticipate that these changes are going to hit school corporations hard over the next 5-6 years. And again, we don't know what further legislative changes will come in the meantime. So we do want to take a rather conservative approach, but to provide the board and the administration the most flexibility to meet what we know are really important needs for the school corporation.
And you may be covering this as you go through it, and you don't have crystal ball. I'm very aware of that. But looking at what we've seen, the history of this, public schools, you want to comment on future funding? If I'm putting you on the spot, you don't have to answer. Okay.
Well, I mean, and I'm going to talk about this in my slides
Okay,
too. I mean,
and
the public school funding is clearly under attack right now. I mean, this is major legislation that is going to fundamentally change how schools are funded moving forward. do I want to speculate on how this all ends? I have no idea how this is all going to end. I don't know what it's going to look like in a month from now, let alone a couple of years. But this is a big change that we're going to walk through tonight.
And the
Not-
trend that we've seen, like you said, public schools are under attack, and to think in the future that we're going to get funded more completely is probably.
Outside of the school corporation taking it in their own hands and doing a referendum, yes, I would agree with that statement. I mean, we've heard from many people that they know that the legislation is maybe not perfect, but they're gonna fix it as we go in the future. This is being billed as a historic tax relief for Hoosiers. I find that hard to believe in the future they're gonna fix anything that would cause the taxes to go back up. And so, yeah, I think what we see here, if this gets passed, it's going to be hard to overturn any of this in the future.
Now that the governor's giving his own health report at his home in Jasper, and the lieutenant governor got a $90,000 SUV. That's more important.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I read somewhere that they were assuming that local taxes would have to be raised to make up for the loss in property taxes.
Yeah, so schools don't have that ability. They gave the ability for cities and towns to increase the local income tax or dollars to essentially replace any lost dollars. Megan, do you guys get lit dollars at all? You don't, okay. So for schools that do share in lit dollars now, they're eliminating that from schools. Schools are no longer allowed to share in lit dollars moving forward, but the cities and towns can increase their lit share. So there's a whole lot of things there. I think it's pretty clear that they're just coming after public schools for whatever reason.
Well, I appreciate that. I did talk to our representative today, and he said that the assumption made is that there's at least 5% flop. That was kind of my reaction.
Yeah, I will say that there's an LSA report out there right now that's been run that show the potential impact of this. We've looked through those numbers. I can't find a way to tie those numbers. Those numbers show some school corporations getting more money from this, some getting less. But overall, it shows the school corporations are going to get more money for the next 3 years, which when this is being billed as a tax decrease, I find interesting how schools can get more money if everybody's paying less. So I don't know where the numbers came from in that report. It's a time.
What organizations gave the report?
So LSA, Legislative Services Agency. So anytime they do a new bill that has an impact on funding, they have to run the numbers and provide it to the legislators so that they can review it. So it shows like a lot of schools are actually going to get a little bit more money. And what Representative Thompson, who is the kind of the big guy on the House side and coming up with some of these, is billing this as a less of more. Schools are going to get more, but probably not as much as they would have gotten before this bill. I can't find a way that he's getting
That is a value, maybe places that have really high property values.
So they are the growth quotient, which we've talked about in the past. That's what is your operations fund grows by each and every year. Historically, it's been up around 5%. They limited it to 4% the last 2 years. The original bill had it going to zero, so you get no new money in your operations fund next year. They did come back and put 4% back in for 2026, so that's probably part of the reason they're saying schools are going to get a little bit more. But that is now going to be set on a year-to-year basis moving forward. So we know it's 4% for 26. We will not find out until next session what it will be for 27 and beyond.
I'm belaboring the point, but thank you very much.
Piggyback on that, some of the figures that we look at, how we've been seeing it is losses on the state representative called unrealized gains. And the numbers, so like the numbers he provided was we were at 7.4 million for 2025, which would go down to 7.26 million in 2026, which is obviously less, but then back up to more than this year's, which is 7.57 million. So that's the numbers that they're kind of pumping. And I think that's just based on probably that report that you said.
Yeah.
So that's where you got.
What we've found is, so the way that report works is it shows the money that you would have gotten if they didn't make the changes, and then it shows the money that you will get if they do make the changes. But they're pegging it all to your net levy that you got in 2025. I'm sure you've looked at this. Almost every school that we've looked at, the net levy they're showing is far less than what your actual net levy is. And so it shows a lot of schools getting an increase over the next couple of years. But when you look at the money you actually got this year, it's a lot more than what they're showing as that baseline year. So it's actually declines each and every year what you got. What we heard was LSA used your 2024 levy, and then instead of grabbing your actual 2025 levy, they used some sort of growth assumptions. And so most schools are grossly understated in what the 2025 number is. I didn't double check that for Newcastle. I can go back and look, but the many schools I've looked at all showed a lower net levy than what you actually got. Therefore, it's showing you getting more money, but actually we started here and we're going down here. So I don't know what else to say on that.
Before we get to more specifics, just to quickly wrap up the lease process. The June meeting is also where we do the initial approvals for the maximum parameters. We also start the lease steps itself. So we would bring a form of the lease agreement between the building corporation and school corporation to you at that time for your consideration. That would also be setting those maximum lease parameters. So the actual term of the lease, the maximum lease rental payments that would be authorized, and just to proceed with the lease steps and using the building corporation. We would kind of, in tandem with the school board meetings, convene meetings at the building corporation to have them also review and approve the form of the lease agreement. And then we come back to you in July to do the last building corporation meeting, and with the school board, hold a public hearing on the lease agreement itself. If necessary, have a hearing related to the additional appropriation of any funds that the building corporation might have to pay the school corporation as a purchase price for the property being used as the lease premise. And then considering a number of resolutions related to the lease financing. So authorizing the actual execution of the lease agreement, approving that additional appropriation of bond proceeds if necessary, approving the building corporation, assigning construction bids and contracts to the building corporation since they will hold the large sum of dollars that will be used for the project. And then the final resolution you'll see there in July is the approval of a supplement to the school corporation's master continuing disclosure undertaking. That's similar to what we've done for all of your other previous publicly issued bonds, just to comply with federal securities regulations. So we come back in July and detail that a little bit more with you all and ask for your consideration and approval of those resolutions. At that point, we would be able to issue bonds. Again, the school board and the administration would retain the flexibility to move as slowly or as quickly as you would like, issue any lesser amount or within any lesser of those maximum parameters. But at that point, we'd be in position to see how your assessed valuation comes back in the fall, and how we want to consider issuing bonds to kind of marry that with your tax rate management strategy. So we would come back in the summer for those particular hearings and board resolutions, and then work with you all and your administrative team in the fall to actually go forward and issue the bonds. Any questions about those particular legal steps?
So whatever we do, the more ambitious one to anticipate changes or the lesser one, tax neutral. We're not going to affect the tax rate.
Potentially.
Potentially what?
Potentially, yes. The legislation is unclear on what it's fully going to do. I'm going to walk through my best guess on it. I believe the answer to be yes. Can I guarantee it? I do not.
Okay. You know, we had the disaster at Blue River. And what we want to get out loud and long is, you know, if we're going to have any messing with the tax rate, and if we are, we'll lose. If there's any kind of referendum, and if not, if we can say it be safe, then we know we're okay.
So I'm much more confident in the debt service tax rate. I think the debt service tax rate we can hold fairly constant over the next few years. The operations fund tax rate is going to go up. And so the total tax rate, what taxpayers see on their tax bill, the tax rate for Newcastle and every other school corporation in the state is going to go up. Sometimes.
Now because of what we're doing.
Correct.
Well, that's what I want to do.
Oh, 100% correct.
Well, that's
The
what I thought.
dollars that you are asking for from the community are not going up because of this project.
Whether we do the 3 or the 6,
Correct.
we can flat and categorically say, we will do nothing that will affect your tax rate.
Not tax rate. I can't guarantee the tax rate because of the way these numbers, but the dollars you're asking for,
Even
the
more
levy,
Okay.
the dollars you're asking for, we're going to, what I found is going to flatline the dollars we're asking for from the community. Now, the tax rate might be different because of what they're doing to the assessed value, and I'll walk through those numbers. But at the end of the day, they want to know what's the tax liability. That is not changing because of this project.
Okay.
I'll let
That's
Matt
what
get,
we want to get out.
Yes, correct.
I'll let Matt get into the specifics of the numbers, but if you all have any other questions tonight, we'll certainly would like to come back if that would be helpful for future meetings as well, but let me know if you have any questions on the legal process.
Thank you, Lauren.
So just for the record, I find school finance riveting. That's what Shoemaker, so I take it.
Okay, I'm sorry. From one Matt Shoemaker to another.
So, my name is Matt Shoemaker. It's a happy coincidence. We are not related in any way. I work for a firm called Stiefel. We've worked with the school corporation for a number of years. So, I'm here to deliver the news on Senate Bill 1. I'm sure everyone's heard of it at this point. Talk a little bit about tonight. I handed this out. The amendment to Senate Bill 1 that they sent out was 350 some pages. We've read it. Do I understand all of it? No. Do I understand most of it? I hope so. I'm going to hit the highlights. Some of this is going to impact Newcastle schools. Some of it is not. All of this is going to impact every school corporation in the state in one way or the other. Some schools are going to be impacted much more significantly than others. Newcastle clearly is on the list that it's going to be impacted. So we'll talk through what I see as the impact. It's more complicated than I could even begin to explain. So I am not going to give you answers tonight. I'm not going to say this is exactly what's going to happen. My goal here tonight is to give you ballpark answers. I think based on what I know that this is the most likely outcome. It's probably going to be different. Hopefully it's a little bit better, but it certainly could be worse. But the way they're doing this is it's too complicated for anyone to give you real answers right now. So couple of the highlights of Senate Bill 1. We talked a little bit about the debt service rate. For school corporations whose debt service rate is over 70 cents, which you guys are at 0.3999, so you're nowhere close right now. But for school corporations over 70 cents, every single bond issue they want to do, regardless of size and payback length, has to be placed on a ballot. Has to go to a referendum. Previously, this was 80 cents. They're moving it down to 70 cents. Again, we don't anticipate Newcastle to ever come close to that. But there's a lot of school corporations that are over 70 cents that are really going to be impacted by this. The biggest thing for you all, and I'm going to talk through this in more detail and actually show you numbers. I'm a math nerd. I apologize if you guys don't like it, but you're going to see it tonight. The assessed value changes. So we've talked about this in the past, but a refresher. So the value of your home, which we would say is the gross assessed value or the market value, that is not the number that the tax rate is applied to. There are deductions in the state of Indiana. There's a homestead deduction and a supplemental deduction. The homestead deduction is $48,000 for the majority of homes. The supplemental this year is another $37,500. So if you have a $200,000 home, you may only be paying on a net assessed value. It's just under, I think it's $97,500. That is the number that the tax rate is applied to. So there are certain deductions, the way the legislation reads right now, that allows you to reduce the value of the home that you pay taxes on. What they are proposing is essentially increasing the deductions up to 67%. So if you have a $300,000 home, when all of this gets phased in, you're only going to pay taxes on a taxable value of $100,000. What that means is all of your homes that are at a certain net assessed value now, when these deductions phase in, your net assessed value is going to come down. If you ask for the same dollars each and every year in a declining net assessed value, you're going to see a tax rate have to go up to fund those dollars. The distinction that Greg brought up that we were talking about was, regardless of the tax rate and how the tax rate functions in the future, we know that the majority of school corporations' tax rates are going to go up. We're now talking about the levy or the tax liability. What are the people actually paying? And when we talk about this, and I'll show it in a little bit, we're not going to ask the community to pay more dollars for your debt service levy. We're going to hold that constant. But is that tax rate going to go up? Most likely, yes, and I'll walk through that. So the assessed value change is going to impact everyone. We're going to see assessed values come down, and therefore tax rates go up for the most part. That is for homesteads, farmland, and your 2% properties, which are rentals. They're going to see a 1/3 deduction moving forward. In the past, the 2%, when I say 2%, I mean for tax cap purposes. They can pay no more than 2% of their gross assessed value. We're going to see all of those farmland and rentals now get a 1/3 deduction, whereas previously they got no deduction. You guys actually have a pretty big makeup of 2% properties. My guess is it's probably apartments. Can't imagine you have any farmland, maybe a little bit. So you are going to see an impact from that as well. I think 43% of your tax base was homesteads, and then another 33% was these 2% properties, which are probably mostly rentals. So you're going to see an impact to your net assessed value from both of those categories. Business personal property has been talked about for many, many years. The original bill had a complete exemption for business personal property, meaning, if you take a warehouse, you get the assessed value for the warehouse with the machinery, the equipment, everything inside of it, that's considered business personal property. Originally was going to totally go away for tax purposes. You would not see that benefit to your assessed value in the original language. They've now brought back a 30% floor, meaning you can depreciate it no further than 30% of its value. So $1 million piece of equipment for your net assessed value is always going to have a $300,000 floor. That is for business personal property that was in service prior to January 1 of 2025. Any business personal property brought into service from here moving forward is going to be exempt from taxes. And so a lot of people were excited that you at least keep your current stock of business personal property. I think the cynic in me would say most corporations are probably going to push up the replacement cycle of a lot of their machinery and equipment because they're no longer going to have to pay taxes on it. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to pay attention to moving forward. I have no idea how to quantify that because we don't know the replacement cycles or how they're going to do that, but that's going to be an impact as well. They did also say if you have a TIF district, any business personal property put into the TIF district, even from now moving forward, will keep that 30% floor. They did that because TIF districts have bonds. They need to repay those bonds, and if you take away that assessed value, it hurts their ability to pay back those bonds. Operation fund and operating referenda. They've said if you have 100 students or more that go to charter schools, you're going to have to start sharing that revenue with charter schools in the future. I don't believe Newcastle is on that list or anywhere close to that list, so you guys should be fine with that, but there's a lot of schools fretting about that. General obligation bonds, I think we've hit on that already. Levy appeals. So there used to be a way for school corporations to ask for more money in their operations fund based on certain metrics for bus and transportation. That is completely being eliminated. So if you don't have enough money to provide busing or transportation, that's on the school corporation to figure out how to deal with that. The credits, I did not think that this was really going to be an important one, but I'm going to show you numbers on why it is. So this is a one-time credit. Homeowners are going to receive a credit up to the lesser of 10% of their tax liability or $300. So they can get a credit for no more than $300, but at least 10% of their tax liability. So if you have to pay $2,000 in property taxes, you're going to get a $200 credit next year. I'm going to walk through the numbers, but this is going to be impactful to Newcastle along with every other school corporation in the state. We talked about lit revenues. Schools can no longer receive lit dollars here in a couple years. They've changed some things with the budget process as well. They've done a whole host of things that are going to impact school corporations. I'm not even fully confident that we've listed everything here that might ultimately impact you. That's how many things are going on. So let's flip the page. We'll get into the numbers because I know that always excites everyone. So this is the potential impact of the deductions moving forward. So doing a little bit of research, it looks like the average home value here in Newcastle, at least listed on the internet, is $147,938. It might be a little bit higher, it might be a little bit lower. We can certainly change that to show you how that impact will change based on the value of home. The way the legislation is written, this 67% deduction is going to be phased in between now and 2031. The way it's currently written is interesting because the $147,000 home in 2025 with the deductions that we talked about currently pays taxes on $62,461 of the value of their home. So the $1.18 tax rate for Newcastle is not applied to the $147,000 market value. It's applied to the $62,461 net assessed value. For 2026, that net assessed value is actually going up. So if your tax rate stays constant, that $140,000 home is actually going to pay more dollars next year the way the formula works, which is interesting. It's actually a 3.68% increase in that net assessed value. In 2027, you're going to lose about 1.66% of that assessed value, and you can see the way that move going forward. The most impactful year is going to be 2031 when this fully comes in. You can see that home loses 13% of their assessed value. By the time you get to 2031, that home is now paying taxes on $48,820 of its value, which is almost a 22% decline. So if you think about all of your homesteads, every one of those is going to lose about 22% for their net assessed value, which is based on, that's how your tax rate is calculated. It's just the levy divided by your assessed value. So if your assessed value is going down, but you're asking for the same amount of dollars, we're going to see that tax rate go up. So the messaging here is going to be, it's going to be impossible trying to talk to the normal person saying, hey, yeah, your tax rate's actually going up, but we're not asking for more dollars. That is a difficult conversation that everyone's going to have. Down at the bottom, we attempt to show what we think your tax rate might do moving forward. So 76% of your tax base is comprised of 1% and 2% properties, which are going to see these increased deductions. Current school net assessed value is $844 million. Moving forward, by the time we get to 2031, we are estimating that $844 million will decline to $702 million. I want to be very clear here. That's not a number. It's not going to be that actual number. It might be higher, it might be lower. This includes the current makeup of your tax base as we stand here today. If you see businesses leave, it's going to go down further. If you start seeing homes being built, that's going to mitigate some of this loss. So this is purely based on how things stand today and how the formula is going to work. I've shown the school's levy. The school's levy, property tax levy this year is $9,989,000. I've attempted to show what I think your levy is going to look like moving forward. You can see it's increasing in 26, 27, 28. It's not increasing because of debt service. It's not increasing because of this project. I have flatlined that. Your debt service levy this year is about $3,375,000. I've assumed it's going to stay that way moving forward. The increase is purely from the growth quotient in the operations fund. If we see this increase, which is about $300,000 a year, you can see what your tax rate's going to do moving forward. Not going to be an impact from this year to next year because of the way the deduction's working and your average home value, that net assessed value actually going up a little bit. But you can see how this starts to escalate pretty quickly. $1.18 to $1.23 to $1.29 to $1.33 to $1.38. And finally, in the big year, $1.54. So we're talking almost 40 cents in increased tax rates because of the interplay between the net assessed value and your levy. But again, I want to be clear, you're not asking for any more money from your community because of these projects. You are asking for a little bit more money in your operations fund, which covers the day-to-day operations of the school corporation. You have costs that are going up from inflation each and every year. They're giving you 4% new money. Does that keep up with inflation? It hasn't the last several years. Will it in the future? Hopefully it will. But it seems like the cost of everything is going up more rapidly than that. So again, here's where the messaging becomes very complicated. Our tax rate's at $1.18. We think it might approach $1.50 or even beyond, but we're not asking for more money because of these projects. That's the part that's going to be very difficult, I think, to explain to the normal person, because they're going to see the tax rate and think that you're increasing the amount of money that you want. Questions on this? Comments?
Property taxes have increased because of assessed value increasing. Again, you don't have a crystal ball, but we are in a very chaotic period. How much will this be affected by assessed values? Periods.
All of this is driven by assessed values. If they did not make a change to the assessed values, we would not see a change in your tax.
So as assessed values change, as chaos unfolds, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, so I mean, we have seen historic assessed value growth in the state of Indiana over the last 5 years. I think this legislation is a reaction to that. Well,
Yes.
we've seen a lot of that assessed value slow down and a lot of communities completely stop. I think it was purely coming from, they think schools have taken advantage of that more than they should have. Where I would argue you have school corporations that haven't been able to do preventative maintenance for the last 10 or 15 years, really since the Great Recession. And now they're taking care of some of those projects that they've had on their checklist for 10 years. And I don't think that they see it that way. And so I think this is them coming back and saying, we're not going to allow that to happen.
Well, there are communities that have done a huge amount of build really nice big houses. It's just not us. So,
Well, but they broad brush everything, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They treat you the same as they treat Fishers, which you guys are not the same school corporation.
well, then Fishers could share some of their money. Oh, no, I wasn't, I was like, actually, sorry.
Could you talk or address property tax caps and how that could play into what we've seen?
Yeah, so I think that's going to be probably the biggest impact to Newcastle. I mean, you guys are already hamstrung by circuit breaker. So as we see, let me step back. So Representative Thompson did a webinar a couple weeks ago with kind of his philosophy on how he wants to see property taxes moving forward. And he's essentially set this up so that once a taxing district total tax rate reaches $3, the taxing district being the school corporation, the city, the library, all of the taxing entities within that taxing district. Once it reaches $3, he wants no additional taxes to be paid. So if your total tax rate goes from $3 to $5, no one pays an extra penny. That's essentially how he's setting this up. Most of your, I have this on the next page, so 63% of your assessed value is contained in the Newcastle taxing district, 64%. The total tax rate for that taxing district, as we stand here today, is $4.24. $1.18 of that is you. There's another $3 on top of that that goes into that. So when you have 64% of your assessed value already at $4.24, That's why you're seeing the circuit breaker issues that you're seeing right now. Moving forward, that $4.23 is going to go up, and it's going to go up significantly. The problem is you're not going to collect any additional revenue, and you're going to have all of the taxing entities sharing in that loss. So I cannot give you numbers on what their circuit breaker is going to do other than to speculate that it's going to go up. How much is going to go up, I don't know, but my guess is it's probably going to be meaningful as all of this phases in over the next 5 or 6 years. Extra circuit breaker loss means you're losing more money out of operations. If you're losing more money out of operations, we're having to transfer more from education. If we're transferring more from education, we're not paying teachers the way we want. However, we have bills in the legislature saying we want to increase teacher pay. So,
And
it's
take,
gonna be tough.
take our books out of it, yeah. Yeah, and share it with Charlie.
This is there's a lot of it that I'm a little fuzzy on. The circuit breaker, I just don't know that there's any way of telling what the impact is going to be with circuit breakers. It's all contingent on what the other entities are doing as well. And given that you're already at $4.24, as that number goes higher, it's just going to be more pain for all of the taxing entities.
So am I understanding, you said it was had to stop at 3?
Yeah, that's the way it's set up now. So, so a corporation can pay no more than 3% of the value of their business. And so once you get above $3, they all hit the tax caps. So if you increase that rate above $3, the corporations aren't paying it. The renters and the farmland, they're capped at 2%, so they can pay no more than 2% of their value. Well, now they get a 1/3 deduction. So when you get to $3, that's really at the $2 or 2% for them. So anything above it is capped. And then now the 1%ers, the homesteads, they get a 2/3 deduction. So when you hit that $3, it's really the $1 or the 1% cap for the homeowners. So when you're getting above $3, that's where the pain is really going to be. I'm interested to see how this works out. There are several communities. We work with a school in Northwest Indiana that their total rate is 88 cents. And this year they lost almost $6 million to circuit breaker because the total rate is over $5. When this goes into place through no fault of their own and no fault of yours, you're going to see the tax cap loss, I believe, go up. How meaningful? Again, I don't know. Am I saying it's going to double? I'm not saying that. Could it? Potentially over the next 6 years, but we're going to see those numbers go up. More and more people are getting pushed above the caps. When you get pushed above the caps, that's just completely lost revenue for the school corporation and other entities. I just want to remind you, I didn't put this legislation in. I'll tell you about it, but
It comes in.
okay, this is the last piece of bad news I'm talking about, and then I'm done, I promise. So, the one-time tax credit that I talked about, which was the lesser of 10% of your tax liability or $300, I think is going to be impactful. So, again, this is back of the napkin. Don't take this to the bank. This number, I think, is probably in the ballpark, but it could be higher or it could be lower. So, what I've done, if you want to go through the math, is I've taken your net assessed value there at the top at 844 million. The percent of your assessed value for the 1%ers of the homesteads is 43%. So $363 million of your net assessed value is attributable to the 1% or the homesteads. The net assessed value of your average home, so that $147,000 home, is $62,461. There was no way for me to find out how many homes there are in Newcastle. That data is just not available, so I tried to back into this. So I've simply taken the net assessed value from your homesteads, and then I've taken that as a percentage of the $62,000. So when you take this, the 363 million divided by the 62,000, you come up with 5,815. My guess is that's somewhere close. It's probably not the actual number, but again, this is all rough math at this point. If you apply the average credit, so again, it's the lesser of 10% or $300. If your average home price is $147,000, then their tax liability is $1,437. That would be your average loss from this one-time credit, because that's less than the $300. That's 10% of their liability. So I'm coming up with a total loss from the one-time credit of $854,805. That's not your loss. That's the loss of all of the entities. So what I've done down below is essentially just broken up the taxing districts, the percent of the AV that goes to the school corporation, and then looked at the district's rate and attributed what percentage of that district rate is based on you. I know this is total nerd stuff, but I come up with a projected loss of what you're going to see next year of about $320,000. This is on top of tax caps. This has nothing to do with it. This is in addition to. Is this what the number is actually going to be? No, but I think it's going to at least be in the ballpark. So in addition to all of this other stuff, you're going to have to find a way to plug a hole of, roughly $300,000. And these numbers, when we first saw the bill, we didn't really pay attention to this because we were so consumed with the assessed value. But as we dug into this one-time credit, it's going to be really impactful for all school corporations. Again, I know I've said that about like 10 different things right now, but you have all of these things that are going to impact you in a negative way coming at you at one time with very little time to plan for or react to.
They have to have a really big bake sale. So all of us we're getting that extra $300 back, which we'll have something to spend it on.
Jen's on. Okay, so the last page is good news. The debt, you guys are in a great position when it comes to debt. This has been long-term planning. This is no coincidence. The administration and the board has gone through this for many years. So I haven't gone too deep into looking at repayment structures because I wanted to get all of your feedback first, or at least thoughts on how you wanted to approach this moving forward. But we certainly will update this. But in looking at this page, you can see where you can see where the payments are this year. Those payments are going to drop. You have a lot of white space out here to really fill in those payments. That's where the repayment of the $3 million or the $6 million, whatever you end up wanting to do over the next several years, that's going to go right in here. And so when I say we're not asking for more dollars from the community, we're simply leveling this off. We're going to keep that if I'm saying we're going to. If this is what you decide you want to do, you're in a position to say, we're not asking for more dollars for this project. Sure, the tax rate might go up, but that's purely a math calculation. We're going to keep our levy the same, the amount of dollars we're asking from debt service for this project, and we can keep that level moving forward. You can pay off these bonds in as little as 4, 5, 6 years. Some of that will go into what you want to do with the next project. Is the 28 project still on the table? Does it want to be in 27, 29? I want to get your feedback, and then I'll update all of these different structures. But I am confident in saying that we can keep that levy neutral moving forward. Having that conversation with the community when they see the tax rate go up is a whole different story that I can say with a straight face. We're asking for the same amount of money in debt service based on this project.
Wow.
Any questions or comments?
Feels like a gut punch.
What the legislators will tell you is if you need more money, we've given you a tool, and that tool is a referendum. Unfortunately, we know a referendum is impossible in the majority of communities in the state of Indiana. That's the tool that you're left with at this point if you don't see all resource.
So the last one that was done in Henry County achieved what, 17% of the?
It was 83% no, I believe. It was 6% it was no.
And on top of that, they are also restricting any referenda to only occur at general elections. So it's once every 2 years.
To be shared.
Right, shared with charters, and operating referendums, different but capital referendum, that would be, you know, trying to get contracts signed with contractors at the same time as anyone else whose projects are being considered and approved at the same time. So you run into just practical constraints as well with that limited tool that you're left with.
So late last week, we heard this was a done deal. They were done talking about it. The governor came out publicly and said this is a historic tax package, tax relief. I will say that maybe there's a glimmer of hope now. The lieutenant governor came out this weekend and blasted this and said no one understands it. The governor needs to veto this, which is very, very interesting. Learned from plenty of legislators that they don't honestly understand it, but have been told to get in line. There was a big rally at the State House today from teachers. So there is a rallying cry behind potentially looking at something different. They had the Salter Committee last year, the State and Local Tax Relief Committee. That was a group of bipartisan legislators to look at property tax fixes. I will say that what came out of that had nothing to do with any of this. They studied it for 6 months. So does this pass? I think probably. Is there a chance maybe there's something in the 11th hour? That's certainly possible. Is all of this, even if it doesn't pass, is this going away? No, something is going to happen. Could they come back and simplify it and make it clear to understand? Probably. Is it going to have the same impact on schools? Probably. So I think we're going to have to just live with some version of this moving forward, unfortunately.
Well, I was told at the State House today that by a couple of different legislators, that we should be able to figure it out, that it really didn't all take effect completely until 2031. So we should be able to figure it out by then. And we did have at least 5% plus that we should be, every school should be able to. And that until they got the numbers back for the money that's available, they didn't really know for sure what it has.
Right.
Well, Lauren and Matt, I want to thank you for sharing tonight. You probably don't get a standing ovation when you present, but you should, because your preparedness, your preparedness and your ability to answer questions. It's very complex. So I will say, like Matt said, you know, the latest, I think last Saturday, the amendment was 368 pages. That was submitted. So just keeping track of the changes and the multitude of changes, and how does that, you know, it gets very complex in terms of how does it all work out to affect every single school corporation? Very, very difficult. So, but it helps us, this conversation helps us know how do we plan and how do we make forward, especially as it relates to the finance lease project. So thank you for being here. Yeah, appreciate it.
And should things change, again, we're monitoring it every day, and we will certainly keep your administrative team informed of any changes, but we're happy to come back and speak with you all if there's anything that we think or that you would just like to hear more of as being significant to Newcastle schools.
Yes.
Lord, we're only on 3C.
Yeah. Well, if you'd like to, if you'd like to take off, we'll just say the same thing. That was riveting, by the way. Just for a brief moment, I was riveted. All right. Okay. Thank you. Good throwaway.
All right, so at this time, we'll move on to item C, which is the additional appropriations hearing for debt service and rainy day funds. And I'll turn it over to Shoemaker and
Yep. So we've done an additional appropriation in previous years. The most recent was last year. We did appropriate funds after the initial budget hearing and approval of the budget for 2024. As you recall, we did rainy day, and as they mentioned, you know, the reimbursement resolution. So we had appropriated those dollars in 2024 in order to start a roofing project to get done and completed over the summer, save us funds and so forth. So we upfronted those dollars with rainy day and reimbursed ourselves when we issued 2024. So a piece of this additional appropriation is also for rainy day again in 2025. That total came out to be $600,000. That would cover the second half of the ERS contract, that we'll talk about later on. But instead of, financing that project, we thought, it was best that we pay the full cost up front, just due to the unknown of the operations fund and so forth. Going forward, we didn't want to further obligate dollars, that might not be there in years to come. So, that is a cash balance. We have over $2 million in the rainy day fund. We would use that to pay for that ERS contract and then reimburse ourselves, once the 2025 geo release was issued, those proceeds. So that's a part of this. The second part is the debt service fund. So in the fall, when we had our hearing and the budget approved, we had a projected debt service payment for the 2024 geo bonds. Unfortunately, once the amortization schedule was completed, we were about $80,000 short in what our estimated payments were. So in order to fulfill the debt service payment, we would have to increase that appropriation by $79,142. Again, this isn't affecting any rates or levies. It's coming from cash balances within those funds, and we have a sufficient cash balance in the debt service fund. So that's where those dollars would come. So in order to fulfill the requirements for an additional appropriation, we have to do a hearing. So that involves questions by the board if you guys have any. But that's kind of just the basis of why we're here and kind of what is included in the additional appropriation for 2025.
All right, so at this time, I'll open it up for questions and comments.
So you said 600,000 would be for ERS and then another 80,000. And we've got 2 million.
So the 600,000 would be the only amount we would be appropriating in the rainy day fund. So that's where from the $2 million, that's where that comes from. The just under 80,000 would come from our debt service cash balance. So there are two funds that we're looking at separate,
Okay. All right,
separately
sorry.
and just in the same
Okay.
hearing.
All right,
Yes.
sorry.
But essentially would be paying ourselves back for the $600,000.
Once we get the lease
Yes.
finance.
Yes. The 80,000 would just come out of our cash balance. We would not be paying ourselves back.
Do we have any other questions or comments on this? Okay, so at this time, we'll close that part of it. And if we are ready to move forward with this, I'll just need a motion.
And I'll move to approve recommendations presented for additional appropriations for the debt service and rainy day funds.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, we will go over the final approval of the Newcastle Virtual Academy, K through 5 and 6 through 12.
So in August of 2025, we will have a new virtual academy. We talked about it last board meeting. It takes two board meetings to go through this process. So once you have over 100 students, you have to have a new school number or a school number for this. So right now, currently, we have 34 students, but we're probably going to add about, I'm going to say 7, maybe 8 students to that here in the next, give or take, in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be in the 43 area. We would like to just, I'd like to bring it to your attention that it will be a K through 5 school and a 6 through 12 school. And there's reasons for that, but I think it's going to be best if we just have the two schools. Most other corporations that have this separate them out between K through 5 and 6 through 12. So it's really, the academy would be 2 schools and with, pardon, 2 numbers. 2 numbers, yeah, 2 school numbers. So the application will be the 2 numbers. And we think that Grant will be the only principal that's 3 times principal because he's got HICA and he'll have the K through 5 and 6 through 12. So Yeah, 3 principals. That's pretty good. I do want to say that the middle school and high school students will not be eligible for IHSA competition.
So you have to do this when you get 100? Okay, so
We're ahead of it. We're just in preparation. But it also takes students off the books from, especially high school, because they're off the books, meaning they won't be eligible for IHSA. They're not eligible now. So when we do that calculation and it looks like classifications and whatnot, we will remove those students off there. Currently, they're in there.
And, I think I asked this last time, so I should remember the answer and I don't. The staffing for this comes from, regular classroom teachers are volunteering to do this, or we have special staffing?
No, we have special staffing. We're paying an individual, and we also pay Edmonton. So they get instruction through Edmonton, but we also have one additional teacher that we're paying. It's not a full rate, but it's a retired teacher.
Does this include HICA?
That does not.
All right, so this is separate, totally separate.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We do have virtual students on HICA, but this doesn't include that.
Okay.
All right, so if there's no further discussion, if we're ready to approve this, we need to have a motion.
I move to approve the final approval of the Newcastle Virtual Academies.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next we'll have letter E, and that is the approval of ERS security camera and camera servers.
So the middle school security cameras and camera servers were done when we renovated, but the rest of the corporation, I don't know if Dustin's still here.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dustin can testify. We're patching, you're MacGyvering the servers as they are.
As best as we can. We're good at it, but we can only do it so long.
Right, and so, and that's one of the things that we really need to upgrade, but, a lot of our cameras are very old, non-functional. And so we've had conversations with the board. We really, wanted to get this, and we signed a commitment prior to pending board approval, so that we can avoid the tariffs, because much of it comes from overseas, and also, so that we can, save about 10%. So it's about $200,000 in savings by committing to it at the end of April or at the end of March in preparation for this. So I believe, Chase, we've already started the process, and I want to thank Chase for his work on this. And I want to thank the board for the ability to ratify this. So any questions on this? Okay.
All right, so if we're ready to vote on this, all we need is a motion.
Okay, I move to approve the ERS security camera and camera servers.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then letter F, section 3 is partnership with East Central Education Service Center.
So we have a fantastic partnership with the service center, and it's been fun to see this property develop. When I look back and say, when I met with there were 2 or 3 meetings with parents in terms of if we're going to close this, what are we going to do? And Sherry was part of those meetings, and it was kind of teary-eyed in terms of what's this facility going to become. And so a couple of the parents on those steering committees have just said, we really want to see Sunnyside maintain its educational focus. And, so it's really edifying to come in and see, 50 to 60 superintendents sitting in a conference, or teachers in here for professional development. I think Friday we've got the superintendents from the region, probably 50 or 60 superintendents come in just on that day. So it's nice to have Newcastle as an educational hub. And I apologize, I didn't realize this was going to last so long. This is like, when I called Pat, I said, I think this is going to be a light meeting. It's not a problem. We got into school finance, and so I apologize to you and your staff, and the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you all and share with the board a little bit more. Oops, and where can you go back?
Yeah, I had gone forward to test it earlier.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Dustin. So it is an honor to share with the board a little bit more about the service center and with the guests as well. So do you need to go back, Dustin?
You can go back.
Okay.
Point it the other way.
Over here?
Yeah.
Not getting anything.
Is it on? Oh, it's blinking.
First one, reload it real quick. And went back to the video. Give me just a moment. There we go.
Perfect, thank you. All right, now see if that's a little. All right, very good. I want to take some time just to share a little bit about educational service centers and the work that we do, but then specifically the impact that coming to Newcastle has made for our service center and really for our region as a whole. So a little bit of the backstory, origin story of service centers is that it is based on legislation that took place in the 70s that allowed school corporations to come together, partner together, and create an organization that would allow there to be the opportunity for districts to achieve cost savings was the primary initial function of the service centers, and cooperate and share programs and services which they could not individually provide but collectively could implement. And currently over 90% of the Indiana public school districts are members of a regional educational service center, and our service centers across the state of Indiana currently support over 720,000 students and almost 50,000 educators. Nationwide, actually just learned this about a week ago because there was an article in the American Association of School Superintendents Journal about educational service centers. Nationwide, 553 educational service centers operate across 44 states. They're called different things in different states. They might be in Wisconsin, they're CESAs, Comprehensive Educational Service Agencies. In New York State, they're BOCES. And so they have a variety of acronyms and names, but all serving similar functions. And that mission is to enable schools, regardless of size, to collaborate, share resources, decrease costs, and extend educational opportunities to students. And stealing a quote from that article that I particularly loved is that they are among the best kept secrets in the K-12 system. So we here at East Central Educational Service Center, we are Region 4, as you see represented on the map right there. We serve a 14-county region, and we currently have 39 member school districts across that 14-county region that we serve and support. And that includes over 74,000 students, over 4,500 teachers, over 300 administrators, and approximately 2,500 support staff. So as I mentioned, the relocation to Sunnyside Education Center has really been an instrumental part of our journey and what we are currently able to offer to the districts that we serve. First and foremost, it moves us closer to the geographic center of our region, which you can see there in our regional map. It provides additional space for professional development services to the educators we serve. And I believe collectively, in total, we've more than quadrupled our space from our previous location in Connorsville. And what may be the most exciting piece of all of this is that it provides a space for powerful career-connected learning experiences for students and for the educators who they serve. And if you, the 6 classrooms that are in the hallway here just outside the door to the left, are what we are calling the RIASET classrooms. So when this space became available and conversations with Newcastle started, we were already very deeply invested in a framework which is based on the Holland Codes, which spells out the acronym RIASEC, to help students tap into their own strengths and interests and to think about potential career pathways that might be a good fit for them. So our facility is also really designed to be a hub of information and experiences for those students to begin dreaming about careers of success and impact in our region, and also a place for the community to bring students, educators, community, and industry partners together to serve and support our students. A quick snapshot of this is coming up, I believe, a week from Friday. We have a lunch and learn event for industry partners, school partners, community partners to learn about youth apprenticeship and work-based learning opportunities and how to grow those throughout our region. So what all are we offering? I talked a little bit about the RIASET classrooms. We call that the Forge Your Future student experience, and it's career exploration and career coaching based upon those 6 RIASEC themes: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And as I mentioned, it helps students identify their personal strengths and interests and to start to begin dreaming and thinking broadly about career paths that might be a good fit for them. Taylor Philhauer, who is here with us, and Liz Ferris are 2 of our staff members who are leading this Forge Your Future student experience. We began on October 3rd with 12 students from Newcastle Middle School. We set a goal, not knowing how realistic it would be, of 1,000 students in the first school year. Taylor, to date, we have hosted
1,825.
and we have another 700 plus by the end of the school year. So we will host over 2,500 students from our region here at Sunnyside, and we are already booking schools through March of next year to come and be a part of this. So it has been, I just can't even begin to put into words how amazing it has been to see this vision, these ideas, these conversations become reality, and to see students here experiencing it and walking away hopefully with new insights about what they have to offer to really the world. And so with that in mind, this next slide, we have a few pictures there, but we recently finished a quick promo video that I would love to share with you that hopefully shares a little bit better insight about what this experience is all about. Thanks, Dustin.
For middle schoolers, where students learn more about their own strengths and interests and connect them to possible future careers. Students learn about the RIASEC model and are able to explore all 6 themes, and through the lens of many different careers, find the 2 or 3 themes that fit them best.
Did you have fun today? Yes.
Yeah, what rooms did you like the best?
I like the realistic, social, and artistic.
What have you liked?
Artistic and realistic. It's like 100% the best. Yeah.
Can you tell me what you liked about the social room?
I liked that it was like we all got to work together.
Why did you connect with those themes?
So realistic, I like getting like hands-on and like doing things with my hands, and then social, I like helping other people, and then artistic, I like doing art.
Which room have you liked the best so far?
It's about realistic.
What did you like about realistic?
The learning's the most fun, and I like the hands-on things.
Which themes did you pick for your son?
Realistic, investigative, and social.
So would you recommend other students to come through this experience?
I would, especially if you don't know what you want to do, because it'll help you find which ones could relate to something you might want to do.
I think they're really taking away that there's just different interests that they might have and what those interests might lead to. So narrowing down what they like and what they don't like, because sometimes knowing what you don't like leads to better options too. So it's just been awesome to watch them be able to kind of picture themselves in a future, or maybe not, and kind of go a different direction and use process of elimination. Everybody can find something that speaks to them no matter which room you're in, which I think is awesome.
We have a quote on the wall of the realistic room from Maria Montessori, and it reads, "What the hand does, the mind remembers." And I love watching students walk out of this experience knowing that there is a place in the world for them.
So as we've been making building upgrades, one of the things we will soon, as you walk into that hallway, over the doorway, it will say, so every child will know that there's a place in the world for them. So that is really, that quote is what really drives us, and what this experience, we hope is providing to the students as well. Along with the Forge Your Future student experience, we are starting, we've been honestly so busy with the student experience here that the mobile experience has been a little bit slower in development, but we want to be able to bring components of, it's hard for some of the schools that we serve to maybe get to Newcastle for a 3-hour field trip and have transportation on both ends of that. So to help with that, and also to provide another entry point for schools, you've probably seen the 2 trailers that are out in the parking lot. We want to bring components of the student experience on the road through the mobile experience as well. There we go. And then there's that quote about really the RIASEC framework really creates a connective tissue, a common language, so everyone in your system can be speaking that common language of self in the world, so every child can know there's a place in the world for them. But that is just one piece of what we provide and what we offer here at the Service Center. Oh, let's take over that. It's okay, you can skip that one. That's okay.
I was trying to help you out.
All good. Career Boost is a partnership with Eastern Indiana Works, in which it is a grant-funded project where we are trying to place youth apprenticeships, establish youth apprenticeships, and place those apprentices throughout our region. And that is actually the focus of the Lunch and Learn coming up a week from Friday here. A lot of professional development, literacy, STEM, leadership development, career-connected learning. A person who may be a familiar face to Newcastle Friends, Dr. Laura Wilson, helps to coordinate a lot of those opportunities for us here at the Service Center. And then we indeed have a podcast. We interview area superintendents and leaders and give them a chance to just talk about the great things that are happening in their district. We are on season 2 of the Forge Your Future podcast, and you can find it on Spotify and on YouTube as well. And cooperative purchasing. As I mentioned in the beginning, we really allow or lean into the fact that we have 39 member districts, and that creates value. And through that value, we can bring savings to districts that they might not be able to provide or procure on their own. So this is a part of the job that has been a lot of fun to learn and grow into, is learning how to bring value and bring cost savings and operational efficiencies as well to the districts that we serve. And just recently, we went through an entire strategic planning process, and we love kind of getting a chance to live out our mission every day. And our mission statement just states that at ECESC, we believe the students' strengths and interests serve as a blueprint for shaping futures of success and impact. And our mission is to empower East Central Indiana school educators, schools, and communities through innovative and workforce solutions that support career-connected learning, prepare students for post-secondary success, and drive educational and economic growth. And, you know, each one of those words, obviously, when you go through a strategic planning process, you spend a lot of time wordsmithing, but we really do believe that both educational and economic outcomes are really central to the work that we do. And we have amazing school districts in our region, amazing leaders, and to be able to be a place where educators come together to network and to learn and grow and share best practices really lifts the entire region. And a big next step for us is partnering more directly and explicitly with industry and actually bringing their lens and their focus into our work as well. There's a picture of our team. When I started, I was one of 9 staff members, and we now have a team of 14 focused in all of those areas, including supporting schools through the literacy cadre. 4 of our staff members are focused strictly on K-3 literacy throughout our region, and currently partnering with 32 elementary schools in that work. And we would invite you to connect and follow us. Facebook and X and LinkedIn are 3 areas where we like to lift up our districts and share the great things that are happening in our region for students. And at the conclusion of the board meeting, which I think is actually very soon, Liz and Taylor and I would love, if anyone would like to see the RISEC rooms, you know, you don't have families that you were wanting to get home to or something. I'm just kidding. We'd love to show you the RISEC rooms and let you get a kind of a little bit more of a taste of what students experience when they come to Sunnyside to be a part of that. So thank the board for the opportunity to share. I'd love to come back maybe once a year or whenever you would have us to share updates and how our work is progressing. But it has been impacted in so many positive ways by the opportunity to be here at Sunnyside.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
So you did a great job. You had to follow school finance and legislation, but you did a great job. And the great thing is that the what?
It was riveting.
It was riveting. Now that was riveting. But the partnership, we appreciate the partnership. It's fun to be a part of this. I want to thank you for the way you support all of our 39 corporations. And because we need all the support that we can get, and you did a great job. One of the neat things of having the service center here is, and I'll be quick. When we had to move Riley over because we had the smoke going off in the HVAC system. They didn't miss a step, and you can tell they were teachers because they just took every kid this way, and it was just like they were part of the team. They were part of Riley was already here. And we just assimilated all the kids in here real quickly. So that was kind of cool to see because the kids were, it was a big field trip day for them. So thanks for your flexibility.
I should mention too, really quickly, we're governed by an executive board of 7 members. Dr. Shoemaker serves on our executive board, and we've established it so that the superintendent of Newcastle can continue to be a part of that executive board, but we're blessed by great leadership through our executive board as well. So grateful for that.
So what's next?
Building grounds,
All right.
transportation services.
Say something.
Yeah.
I would do want to add that I worked quite a bit with the team over at the service center, and nothing but a joy every time we come over, and just always helpful, always such a great partner. So I do echo.
Commute's easy too.
It's not quite, yeah, the drive is a lot easier than the Congressville, so we appreciate that. Couple of updates with some projects we have going on. High school restroom progress, a lot of great progress we've seen on all 3 floors. They're working actually on a lot of flooring. It's neat to watch terrazzo being laid. I haven't seen that before, so they're doing some of that right now. The track bidding process for that track expansion and resurfacing, we had a pre-bid meeting actually today. We've had about 5 or 6 companies reach out with interest in that project. So we're interested to see how that will play out here in the next couple of weeks. Working with a company to facilitate sign mock-ups for signage at the field house, for those of you familiar with that project. And we are doing CEC roof bidding and quotes. Those will be coming in pretty soon, but we do have a meeting actually tomorrow with local companies because we would like to stick with a local company for that because we have more control over who we can request quotes from and bids from based on the price of the expected price of the project. We are working currently on summer improvement plans, and we're working with principals and directors from across the school corporation to talk about building needs and what they could possibly, we could possibly do over the summer while students are not in the building. Safety concerns, of course, will always be made the first priority with those requests from those principals and directors, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure we facilitate those improvements as necessary. Want to also mention, we are excited about the partnership we have with the Live Coalition. That coalition here in Henry County, they applied for a grant and received that grant, and as a result of it, they're partnering specifically with Newcastle High School to do the Teens Linked to Care grant, working with our students at the high school with a youth advisory council, and they'll also be providing a full-time site coordinator for that grant at the high school. So we're going to have a staff member for 2.5 years, full-time staff member, along with that grant to facilitate some neat experiences for our students. So that's helpful.
All right. Next, we move into the superintendent's report.
So as Dustin loads, we'll show the pictures. How's that? That sound good? And as that's all right. As you load it up, Mr. McDaniel mentioned some grants. We also got the $100,000 behavior grant that'll provide professional development for some of our teachers and board certified behavior analyst support for them. $125,000 for advanced manufacturing grant. And we also get a grant to support early childhood infants and toddlers through the Henry County Community Foundation with the Early Childhood Network. So that's exciting. So we're just going to go through some of the pictures here. I know it's if some of you know, some of you don't know, the board's been here since 4:30, so it's been a long meeting. But I would like to go through, and the first one I am going to mention, these kids did a phenomenal job, a lot of resilience here. They went through some adversity and challenges. The Dynamics won small unit voice grand champion, best choreography, best vocals. Maddie Louder was selected as outstanding vocalist and overall, which is huge. Red Hot Blues took and won small mix, first runner-up, People's Choice. And congrats to Judy Hubbard and Ethan Hutchison and DJ Shoemaker for their dedication to the students. I'm not going to go through all of these in terms of the reading of them, but the next one, you're going to see some of our students, 2 sophomores, 105 juniors, and 90 seniors were inducted into the National Technical Honor Society before spring break. The next one is vehicle extraction, and that's to the Career Center. Newcastle Fire Department, they taught our Career Center fire and rescue classes how to extract not students, but people from wrecks and collisions. So that would be exciting if I was out. That's the hands-on part. The Gala winners is next. We were fortunate to win the Large Corporation or Large Business Award of the Year. That was for 2024. I don't think we've ever won that, so that's fun. In the middle of that, not just fun, but it's rewarding because we put a lot of time into the development of our programs. Judy Hubbard won Citizen of the Year, gave a wonderful speech, and congratulations to her. Zoe Williams, one of our Career Center students, won the Young Professional Award. So we just we were on a roll that night. We also had John Thompson, Ada Habler, and Emily Hurst, who were all nominees. Middle school college visits. The next one is students at the University of Indianapolis and Indiana Wesleyan. The next slide is Panther Awards. Students showing glow notes. I have no idea what that is in the middle. I couldn't tell you what the glow notes are, but they look happy. If you can see the faces, they're ecstatic. I'm like, that's a good Beach Day. Again, that's the next slide. Yeah, when you can't go to the beach, you bring the beach to you. So there you go. Eagle Beach, Eastwood students got to have some fun right before spring break. Percussion state finals, Becca won. She always does a phenomenal job. The middle school earned gold rating, and high school percussion took 6th place. Congratulations to them. The next slide is Riley Knight of the Arts and Fam Jam. So students having fun there. We want to thank Mrs. Thalls for organizing and hosting the event. And Wildcat assembles. Wildcat assemble. Okay, I don't know what that means, but I do know what that.
It's from the Avengers. Their new thing.
Okay. Oh,
That's
okay.
Kindergarten
I haven't seen the
Roundup.
movie. Yeah, it's a kindergarten. That's what I was going to say. It's kindergarten roundup, and that's the Wildcats there. So the Wildcat team, they're excited, and they always do a great job for our incoming kindergarten kids. Next one is tennis in full swing. I like how you play on words. Tennis full swing. Very nice. And so we beat Rushville 5-0, and that was fun. The next slide is historic. And that's our first boys volleyball team. First time ever in the history of Newcastle schools. And we won a game. Yes. And we beat Irvington Prep. No. Our first home game is this Thursday versus Irvington Prep. So come out and see that's Thursday this week in the field house. John Dickin is very proud to be the first ever boys coach. And we have 9 games scheduled. So it's about 5 more than what we thought we were going to have. On May 5th, we have Shelbyville, and that's exciting. So the last thing I've got, I believe that's the last thing, and that is Stanley DJ. I'm not going to go into the details, but DJ Shoemaker had a medical episode and is still in the hospital and will be in there for quite some time. He has made some nice recovery. So there's a benefit concert on April 17th, which is Thursday. And Jackie, do you know what other corporations are going to be there?
Westfield is bringing their all-girls show choir, and Noblesville is bringing parts of both of their show choirs, and they're going to stand and sing. And the response that DJ received from the Noblesville community and the school was phenomenal, from the emergency rescue, lifelining, the whole 9 yards, superintendent coming, bringing food, bringing counselors for the kids. It was extremely amazing. So, just very appreciative, and they wanted to still continue their support of his recovery.
I don't know what the GoFundMe amount is, probably in the neighborhood of 25,000. So
It's above that.
is it? Yeah. So, okay, that's it.
All right, at this time, we will discuss the budget and the transfer from education to operations.
Yeah, and real quick, I noticed in the agenda notes, the amount hadn't been updated. So in the resolution, the amount is 325,000. So I just didn't get that changed, and obviously mid scale for these little things and big things too. So to bring that to your attention. But for the March 2025 transfer in the education to the operations fund, that amount, as I mentioned, is $325,000. Again, that reimburses the operations funds for those expenses that were once allocated in the general fund. And I just need your approval to make that transfer.
Do I have a motion for this transfer?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, at this time, if we have any public questions or comments, you have 3 minutes, and you can state your name and address, and it goes out.
Can I do something real quick before?
Yep.
Okay. This is Hucklebee's child education class from the Career Center helped those kindergarten prep get bags ready for providers for childcare, and they were such a huge help. They got 161 thank you notes plus helped us pack bags. So that was a huge help for us. And they were just charming. So, yeah. Down there.
All right, anybody have anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Good job, board.